All right. So again, thanks for coming to our April Emerging Centers call. We have Sarvani from the University of California, Merced. She's going to start us out with her origin story, followed by Jane Combs from the University of Cincinnati, and then we'll have a little discussion afterwards. So they're going to give about like 10 minutes apiece, and then we'll have questions afterwards. So just try to hold your questions. Sarvani, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Let me go ahead and start sharing my screen. Patrick, if you can allow me to do that. There you go. Hello, everybody. I'm Sarvani Chadalapaka, Director of Cyber Infrastructure and Research Technologies at UC Merced. So here I was trying to map out the journey of UC Merced RCD Origin Story, and I have 4 arcs: the foundation and the vision for RCD program at UC Merced, how we started off building from zero, so from the ground up, building that program, building the community, and how did we scale our infrastructure? How did we scale our culture, people? And then now what's next? The sustainability, the institutionalization of our RCD program. So we are a young, recently R1 public research institution. We were founded in 2005, so we are rather new to the academic sphere. The way we have started hiring faculty members for our institution is more focused towards computational research than for wet labs. So UC Merced, as we were growing, the focus was has been on computational research as well. So we don't have a traditional math department. We have applied mathematics departments. We don't have chemistry department. We have chemistry and material sciences. We have the applied context of pure sciences in our faculty constitution. So the campus has recognized that research computing is one of the core missions of core aspects of UC Merced's research mission. How did we get started, though? We have our faculty members have received an NSF MRI Compute Cluster grant in 2014. Up until then, we had 2 server rooms. We call ourselves the Wild West. We had individual department-led, we had faculty-led efforts in our server room spaces. There was no centralized support. So once this MRI Compute Cluster grant came through, then our faculty members, the Office of Research and Economic Development and the Office of Information Technology put their heads together and decided that the team that supports research computing is going to be sitting in the central IT. However, there is a part of the director role, the person leading the RCD program is going to be sponsored by the Office of Research and Economic Development. So for a few years, that's how the program got started. And once the director of the program got hired, he then went in and got sponsorship for one other staff line to that person was supposed to be the systems administrator, the facilitator, the whatnot, the boots on the ground for this role. And that happened to be me. So that's like we were 2-people team that started off the RCD program, and we decided that the mission of our team is going to be to help researchers navigate through their compute environments, whether they be local, like they're using their own desktop and want to scale up to campus resources, or whether they want resources that are beyond our campus capabilities and they want to scale up even further. So our team was going to help with that effort for our scientists. So now we have this team, we had the structure. We then started building the team. We called ourselves the Cyber Infrastructure and Research Computing, and now we call ourselves Cyber Infrastructure and Research Technologies. And we went ahead and launched the Committee on Research Computing. These are faculty members, a coalition of the willing that are advisory boards that have opinions in that have insights into the computational environments and how they would envision or how they would need for us to operate to run to help them run their research. And the early focus for our team has been to centralize the server room management to get past that Wild West environment to account for all the inventory in the server room spaces, look at the structures of support for faculty members and understanding like what services we can streamline, what services we can bring into IT ecosystem. In the past, the tickets that there was no ticketing system, there was no way of tracking all the requests. It was just a pile of emails. So we moved on from that. Again, sifting through all the emails, figured out what the support, what services made sense to become ServiceNow service requests, and we moved to the IT ecosystem there. On the picture, you see 3 grad students then, they're now doctorates, all of them have been helping with reorganizing the HPC cluster that we had on our campus. So they were helping re-architecture the system. They were I was like working with them in reconfiguring the InfiniBand there. So including our students and having them experience the systems administration angle side of research computing is something that we try to keep incorporating and giving students opportunities to volunteer to participate with us has been an important goals for us. So then, now that we built this program, we have some services, we have this faculty committee on research computing, and then by that point, we have scaled up our users from 40 users using the entire cluster to about like 600 users. So we had people that know about research computing program at Merced before I would just be pulled out of coming out of a meeting, and faculty members would ask, oh, you talk about this HPC cluster, is that really on campus, or are you kidding me? And from that point to a point where faculty are now requesting services from us, which means they kind of know who we are and where we reside. So that's we did the outreach through orientation sessions. We had a lot of one-on-one faculty consultations. We were present during our campus-wide events like fall grad student orientation, spring research week, office hours, hands-on training, building up that stack of initial documentation to bring that growth from 40 users to over 600 users on the cluster. And The second MRI, so this is where we kind of move towards formalizing and scaling up the infrastructure. We got a second MRI grant. We call that Pinnacles Cluster. And our campus, as a part of growth of our entire campus strategic program, we call that Project 2020, built out data center for us. It's a modular data center. We built it out. We had that set up on our campus. And the day that we decided to, we had scheduled in a day to move our existing HPC cluster from an older server room space, which was no longer had the power or the cooling to support this infrastructure, into this Borg cube. We call it Borg cube. One of our faculty PIs is a fan of Star. I'll be hated for this. Star Wars or Trek? Star Wars. Okay, thank you, Mike. Okay.
Trek.
Okay, Trek. Okay, thank you. So yeah, we call it Borg cube. And so the date we scheduled to make this move was the date that COVID came in and hit us, and the campus closures were supposed to start on that day. However, I made an executive decision. We were still going to keep the safety measures in place. At that point, it was gloves and making sure that there was physical distance, and only 2 people were in the space, and we still carried on the move because at that point, I was thinking if any research was going to happen without faculty needing to be on site, it was computational research. So that proved to be right when we had cluster downtime for about like 1 or 2 weeks. It was delayed, but then it was not as bad as having to wait for a year and a half. So that move happened. And so now we had this data center, we have the capacity, we have the infrastructure, and we have these MRI grants. So now what? What happened is that we had campus, one of the head nodes passed the MRI lifetime fail. And then at that point, we had hat-in-hand funding model. We were going and asking for funding from campus leadership to be able to replace some of these equipment. So that's when we realized, okay, there's no cohesive life cycle planning or funding mechanisms in place for this program. At that point, our director stepped out, and we had like 2 interim faculty members acting as interim directors, and I was helping lead the program. And it was at one point, it was about when the hardware failed, we had to come up with the replacements. We did, and we started coming up with comprehensive funding plans in place. For example, we went in, sought out operational life cycle management funding from the Office of the Provost, annual funding, and we got that in place. And then the second thing that we did is a cost. I did a total cost ownership, the TCO model for the services that we provide, for the infrastructure that we have, for the data centers that we support, and then the immediate needs for our faculty members, and built out the services that would make sense for us to generate revenue streams from. And as a part of the campus investment, what we've done is built out, purchased an active research data storage. And for redundancy of the cluster operations, we had purchased like head node, login nodes to set up our redundancy. And then with partnerships from graduate division, we have gotten software licenses for our faculty that are in high volume, and that made sense for individual faculty to not buy for themselves, because collectively as a campus, we were spending about 10 times more than what a campus license would cost us. So identifying the efficiencies in and then identifying what the next maturity level is, and getting the funding streams, revenue streams for this is how we started doing the strategic investment in planning for our program. Having said that, we had a campus leadership change. We had a new chancellor, we had a new provost, we had a new dean, we had a new vice chancellor of research, and we had a new vice chancellor of IT. So again, we had to go through all of these processes again, and again, at that point, I got hired in to lead the program. So, and there was a new research computing director as well. So figuring out, having the same conversations again with the interim people and then with the new people, that is that is the place that we are in now, and securing those funding commitments, and making sure that while we think of strategy and policy, we have the operations in place, and that's something that is almost automatic in a sense, right? That's the funding that we don't have to go back and make sure that it is still there. That's the place that we are in at this point. However, what happened though over the past month or so, we have been certified or classified as a Research One institute. So that means that again, research mission is in the limelight. It's in the focus for us now. And again, computational research has been one of the important pillars of research for our campus. So for us to advocate for our program would be easier for us now. I spoke about the recharge model. So as far as for the sustainability and the cost model that we had recharge model for some of the services like core hours and personnel time. We have secured service level agreements for condo node purchases on our shared HPC cluster for data storage, and the emphasis was more on like cost recovery and also for shared responsibility with faculty. So what's next? We in the last year, we have received an NSF CC Star Regional Compute Grant. We are underserved population in the California. The California Central Valley is the underserved region in California, and one of the things that we wanted to build is a compute ecosystem to bridge those barriers, to lower the barriers to access for our valley and researchers that need the compute resources. So we now have we now are part of the Open Science Grid. We have the CC Star hardware, and we have scheduled symposium to bring in all of the institutes, all of these partnering institutes and institutes in the Central Valley, and faculty and grad students and undergrads that are interested in using computational equipment for their research and for their education and learning. So that was really a major milestone for us. We are moving towards becoming not just a trusted partner and service provider for our campus, but also an emerging leader in that provides computation and infrastructure and training for researchers in the Central Valley region. So that's the that's what's happening now. That program is ongoing. And then, like I mentioned, we are moving towards getting sustained campus funding for our operations. I'll stop there, and like Patrick said, we will take questions after Jane's presentation.
You're muted, Jane.
I think after 5 years, I would know to just hit that unmute, but okay, great. Thank you, Sarvani. That was so good. I'm going to focus a little bit a little differently on mine. I wasn't going to have slides at all, but I ended up putting some together. But my name is Jane Combs. I'm the director of the Advanced Research Computing Center at the University of Cincinnati. These are the three things that I'll be talking about today. Just briefly, our origin story, challenges, and sustainability. Our origin story is almost, it's interesting to hear yours, Sarvani, because ours is kind of backwards. We are in R1. We've been in R1 university for many years. We have 42,000 students. Actually, I think we're closer now to 50,000 students. We bring in about $800 million, or we have 793 in research expenditures. I just learned yesterday at our Midwest Research Computing and Data Consortium annual meeting that the amount of doctoral student doctorates awarded is also an important figure that Preston Smith from Purdue, if you haven't heard his presentation, or if you haven't heard it lately on ROI, it's definitely something that I think this community, I hear it about every session or every conference I go to, and I still learn every time from that. But so our story started out, I think it was in 2014, we submitted our first CC Star proposal. I was along as a project manager, and we had a professor who knew he needed high-speed networking. We got that first one returned without any comment because I think it was missing pretty much everything that it was asked for. So we submitted again. I said, I need to learn a little bit about this. I read the call the second time, and actually we got awarded the second time. So we got a science DMZ. We had a physicist here who sat with me over in our TUC, our Union Center, and helped me write that grant for him because he needed it, and learned a lot from him. Also became very thick-skinned from working with that particular physicist. It's a long story I could tell you later, but anyway, so we did that, and we kind of said, we think there is research happening on campus. I was actually in the IT department at the time, and we didn't support anything that was research. They hadn't even really thought about it at all. Our engineering school had a cluster. There were several clusters actually in engineering. That had happened obviously organically because we didn't have a centralized one. So around 2018, we had a researcher come from Georgia Tech. And up until then, I had been started investigating and said, we're the only research level 1 university that doesn't have their own cluster or centralized cluster for people outside of engineering. Part of that also was because we do have the Ohio Supercomputer Center here in Ohio, and our main computational scientists that needed those resources were using the Ohio Supercomputer Center, and they were very happy with that. So what I started doing was bringing the Ohio Supercomputer Center down here to Cincinnati and having them give workshops, and tried to increase the usage there. We found along the way that even though we could help people get on board, the people at OSC, the people that needed to use those resources, if they were not typical, like our computational chemists, we have aerospace, computational fluid dynamicists. Those people really knew how to what they were doing, and they knew how to do it. What we started finding around that time was that we had people that wanted to use those tools, but needed a little bit more assistance, and maybe weren't just doing massively parallel work. So we submitted actually an NSF grant to get a condo up there, but to have some grad students at UC help support those researchers. Our feedback from that was, you need staff at UC if you think you're going to actually help. You can't do this with the grad student. So then we decided that we needed to start looking for at least one staff person here to be able to help people use the Ohio Supercomputer Center. And then along came this researcher from Georgia Tech, and he had a $250,000 startup package. And he said, where's the cluster that I can put this money into so I can extend that cluster? I don't want to run my own. And so then that was when our Office of Research VPR and our CIO said, we need to support this guy. They did a lot of work to get him to come in. So we decided to build a pilot cluster with his funding. He paid for half of it with his $250,000. The Office of Research, the VPR, then met that with another $250,000. And we started our first pilot cluster. And when I say that, I say it was me, who I was a project manager at the time. And then I found a couple of guys that were running the clusters in engineering and said, hey, we need to set up this cluster, can you help us? And so it was kind of an interesting model where we really didn't have any staff except for these two guys that I've managed to find 20% to pay 20% of their FTE for them. So what we did though was we now I was kind of connected in with the NSF, with the CC Star people, and we found NSF Bridges, which is a program. So we had to find free people, free resources. And so we had Eric Coulter and Steve Bird, they were running this program where they helped us install the software and get the first cluster up and running as a pilot. We also had Bob Chaddick at the time. I served on one of his NSF review panels for IU. Jetstream was coming on board, and he said, you are close to IU within driving distance. They're one of the premier research computing centers in the United States, probably the world. You need to connect with them and see how they can help you. And so, because everybody, I think outside of UC believed that UC needed to have a research computing center. And you'll see in my challenges, the hardest part was convincing our leadership and internal here, because we were not, unlike what Sarvani said, that they were more computational focused. We were not computational focused at all, except for some of our engineers. And so our VPR at the time, and still is a chemist, but he's a lab chemist. And he was like, I'm getting along fine, so everybody else is getting along fine. But so thankfully I had these external resources. I went there to IU. We worked with George Turner, who he volunteered, and IU let him meet with us. We called it the Adopt a Research Computing Center program. He met with us for 3 years weekly, and he was committed to us, and he helped us lay everything out, figure out how we were going to do everything from Slurm configurations to trying not to use preemption, just all those things that none of us really had any sort of an idea. Even the guys who started helping, that they were in the smaller distributed, they were just anybody would line up and use their tools. So that was really important. And I feel like we're still in this spot with a lot of emerging centers still, that, you may have one technical person, but maybe you don't have the somebody that can help communicate to your leadership, or when there's one and done, that's a hard place to be, to try to build. It's I was just with IU and Purdue and those groups at the consortium this week. They have 20 employees. They have 2 project managers. They have a communications team. Those things they have people that have done this for years. So it's our emerging groups that really need to look outward and find these resources. You know, it requires a lot of networking. It requires being, you know, available. I always say you got to show up. So you got to do the other things like the review panels and those sort of things, do the volunteering. But that was the only way that we could do it. So we also had a gentleman who was running one of the clusters. He retired and then he stayed working with us for free. He wouldn't let me pay him because he said then I would tell him what to do. So, you know, so that was okay. But so then, you know, I have here the networking and volunteering. I volunteered at SciNet and then at PEARC. I was on review panels. And then now I'm the vice chair for the executive committee for CASC. All of those things and the information that I learned at every one of those meetings was 100% key to being able to develop the center as it is now. And we're still working on that because we're still emerging just like everybody else. So in 2019, we got an NSF MRI award. That faculty member who came along, he was the PI. He got use cases together. We had huge tables of need and resources that we needed to have. So we did get the MRI award. Of course, that was right then when the pandemic hit. So it took us a couple of years to get our equipment in. We also had to update our data center, which I know a lot of you have that same issue. You know, our data center was from the 1970s. We had to add some water to it. We use, because the cooling was not sufficient, we bought a Hewlett-Packard. They have a advanced cooling system. It's called ARC, and I can't remember what that R is about. But so that's cooled. We have our racks inside of that, and it's cooled by water. That's been a learning experience for our data center folks and for our facilities folks providing water like that. They turned off recently. They had some maintenance and they just turned off the water. So they said, oh, we didn't know where that water was going. So that's been another new communication effort for us that we have to, you know, and I think we all find in this role that we have to know a lot about a lot. It's not enough to just know about what your machines are. You have to know your environment and those sorts of things. We did start out with our with faculty investment that and researchers could buy the equivalent number of hours for a GPU. We had A100s. So to extend, because we didn't get enough hardware with our MRI. So we had researchers, they could invest in the cluster. And then for 5 years, they would get the equivalent number of hours that for one GPU node or for CPU nodes. And then they would have a priority boost along with that. We kind of stopped that when we became a core facility, which maybe I have that in here, but we became a government cost compliance core facility. So there was some concern over providing different levels of resources for different costs. I've now since found, thanks to people in this community, that you can provide priority boosts without providing any sort of an issue with government cost compliance, as long as you're not charging different rates. So that's a whole other, I think we've had meetings here on emerging centers about being government cost compliance and how you match that. But that's one of the things we learned. This slide here just shows, this is something that we hand out every year to our department heads and to the college staff that provides kind of what we do. You know, instead of just saying we have this many cores, which we do that also, or this many resources, you know, what we found, and this was one of Bob Chaddock's, one of his many nuggets of information to me, that I heard him say that 97% of NSF researchers need something other than traditional large-scale HPC MPI. And so we probably, like all of you, have a lot of researchers who've never used any sort of research computing tools at scale. So they're new. We have a College of Medicine, a lot of data scientists, a lot of people. So what we decided in this particular document is that we wanted to start kind of at the top. Like, are you looking, not are you looking for GPUs, but are you looking for notebooks? Are you looking for containers? Are you interested in quantum? And then we have the next layer, which is the next layer of what our stack is. We have 2 computational researchers. One of them are research facilitators. One of them is funded through an NSF Skype grant that we won last year, focusing on AI. That's been a very important position to add to our department. And then you can see the rest of the things. We don't actually offer cloud services here, but we work very hard to bring people to Jetstream, which continues to be kind of a big lift for us, and I'm never sure why. So we're working. Handout, or we have on our website. It shows you can see here more the configuration of what we have. We still have a very small cluster. We have about 94 projects, PIs, and probably 300 users overall. Storage, we have Lustre, we also have bulk, and then we have tape backup, which is fun that's coming back. So challenges, the first challenge and the continuing challenge was the not having really a UC, a computational community here. So that and the lack of awareness in our leadership, we still struggle trying to convince people that this is something that's needed for our researchers. Obviously, the best voice for that is our researchers. So we also have an advisory council to the vice president for research, but we still have not been able to get the a big investment, which we wish we had. So funding is always, everybody knows, is constantly something that we're looking at. It's always easier to find people or find one-time investments. We have been in the IT department, the organizational leadership changes, and then they moved us over to the vice president for research. And then IT decided that anybody that touched any sort of computers had to be back over in IT. So then they moved us for about 6 months back over into IT. And then the vice president for research said, wait a minute, I'm paying for everything that they're doing. I want them reporting up to me. So now we're back in the Office of Research. So that's been rather a challenge. Trying to convince our leadership and why we need this. Benchmarking has been hugely helpful for us. CARC provides a lot of that. The capabilities models and those sorts of things. I use everything that everybody creates that I don't have to create. And in the very beginning, I sent something out to all the research directors I could find randomly, and Henry Newman wrote me back and said, here's your answer. Every other R1 university can't be wrong. You guys need this. So that was, so I continue to learn from Henry also. Sustainability, we are, like I said, a core facility service center. Our annual budget or our annual expenses are about $500,000 a year. We cover about 150,000 by charging 0.3 cents for a CPU core hour. So more of my time, I think, is spent billing and invoicing and charging than we ever will bring back. But we have a research a VPR who believes that if you don't charge, people will take advantage of the systems or whatever's, and he said nothing's free in his world. So I spend a lot of time with that. We are getting ready to use ColdFront, which we had to have a student programmer put that in because, again, we have 2 research facilitators, 1.5 system admins, and me. So that's always a challenge. We did start this year. We partnered with our IT department because they said, okay, we moved you guys. You went back to Office of Research, but we have to do your security and your bare metal, anything with the operating system and down. So now my one sysadmin has spent this whole year trying to train 6 system admins and enterprise IT how to learn how to support HPC. So that's been really interesting and fun. And he's like, I mean, it took him 8 years. So future for us, we're looking back at the condo because we have a lot of users that just don't want to wait. We use open on demand. We're expanding our interactive. We now have a couple of nodes that we're dedicating to that. But we probably will allow, our computer science department is really interested. They say they're going to build their own cluster if we don't let them buy their own hardware so they can have something to look at. We also are submitting an NSFS10 and MRI submission. We still go for the enterprise funding from hopefully from our national people, and we're looking into industry partnerships and what those models look like. So that's it. Happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, all. Any initial questions?
I had a couple in chat. First, well, actually, in either case, I'll point it to Sarvani or Jane. Your user count, are those historical overall, last year users, etc.? Just so I can figure out, how I'm stacking up.
So when we started off, we had 40 users on the cluster, right? And 400 users, we brought them were active users in the first year. So we had that spike in the first year. But at this point, we have 600 active users. Active users are users that have used the cluster over the past year or so.
And for us, honestly, we had about 200 projects on our pilot, but our pilot was free. And you wouldn't believe how quickly we saw our number of users drop when we started charging just that little bit. So we've been building back up, but we tend to increase, probably double our users in the last 2 years. The hard part about that is our users are changing, and wanting more things and different things. We're discussing whether or not we ought to offer the Gen AI models. We saw Purdue now is doing that. Of course, they're well staffed and able to do that. But is that something that we want to step up? We offer on demand, so you don't have to install your own notebooks, and you can use our notebooks and those sort of things. But we're continuing to look at abstracting away from the shell environment, the command line. So what does that mean? And that's, I think we could have a huge increase in users if we got better at that, and if we did a better job of marketing what people can do with the scale of tools, because there's a lot of people that need it, but they don't know. They say they don't want to come to us. They don't need a supercomputer. So that's kind of, we're kind of struggling with that right now.
So something that comes to mind that y'all both kind of touched on that was a success for you, that I'd like to dig into more is, in most of the interactions that we have, there's the established enterprise IT and research IT. And in my experience and seeing and hearing also the emerging centers success stories, is there's a resistance for enterprise IT to lend the responsibilities and let research IT, I'm trying to be put, take ownership of those so that it's successful. What has been the strongest selling point that you have found when you go and you interact with resistance that says, if you let the research side of the house implement or take care of this, then it benefits you in this way? What have you observed over the course of your interactions?
I think for us, what we've seen in this last year when we've been trying to educate or, train our research, our enterprise folks, just the more they know about what we do. I mean, it's been very eye-opening, I think, for them that, we can't just call a vendor and say, come fix our equipment. That's though, like on a technician to technician level. I don't know that I've been very successful otherwise, honestly.
I would echo with Jane on this. Because we all report to the CIO, my life has been easier. We are all part of the central IT. So I have a peer-to-peer working relation with the team that leads the rest of the infrastructure, the enterprise infrastructure, the network, the security, and even the cloud, enterprise cloud environment. So talking to them about being researcher advocate before bringing in the researcher into the conversation has helped me in convincing or helping them see how researchers' use cases are and thought process is. But beyond that, I don't think there was a point where we said, okay, just give that to us. We are better off taking care of it. I don't have the staff to be able to say that or not lean on these rest of these enterprise IT teams. I don't have an expert in, I only have one systems admin. If he goes on a vacation, we're just like, we're just person down. So I have to lean in on the networking team, the enterprise IT systems administration teams to help me triage some of this when our team is down. But I was never in a position to take on the tasks from them.
I'll stick in that we had about a 30-year period of reasonably decentralized IT for research. And I was participating in that for about half of that in the decentralized side. And again, some of this is local context / mistakes we made that, you know, are not necessarily ones that are going to be replicated everywhere. But 3 research centers individually set up their own research IT in the mid-1980s. Part of that was technology driven in terms of not being able to delegate things around. Part of it was probably just territorialism. I came in about 15 years later out of that. And honestly, me and my coworker who had run things for about 10 years prior to me arriving, you know, we had probably the most functional one and the most widespread one. We also had a really, really, really good relationship with central IT because we solved more problems than we brought to them, and we always had a good relationship there. You know, we did run a lot of our own, you know, layer 1 on up stuff at the time. Over time, a lot of that other research IT sort of either atrophied or technology improved to where things could be delegated when central IT was on board with that. Now, I'll also say central IT did not even delegate things around internal to central IT for part of that period, you know, to where even like desktop support people did not have access to do certain management things in their areas. Again, part of that was technology, part of that was people. So I've been in central IT for 7.5 years now. I am basically the only person in central IT that is research focused, and I'm hoping to grow that kind of like these nice folks did. But absolutely, I love not having to own every single aspect of the research enterprise of this place. I do own the HPC, you know. I do own the InfiniBand. I do not have to own every bit of scale out NAS because I can tie into what the university has. I do not have to own every inch of Ethernet. I do not have to own the Science DMZ, and I don't, you know. And there is a hurdle sometimes of getting central IT to respond to research. I will also say, and I don't know if Jane's people are this way or not in her computer science program, there are a lot of people who say, we got to have, and they really haven't thought it through. You know, if her people want to do HPC research and build the next MPI, cool. have a baby cluster to do that. But, you know, if they're running LLMs and you know, doing software development of existing, you know, novel applications that they just need to crunch cycles on, there's no reason for that, probably. But it is hard to convince the researchers sometimes that, and again, they're Henry Neiman, everybody knows him. He's got you know, talks of where, you know, research can learn things from enterprise and enterprise can learn things from research because they're not identical situations. But a lot of research a fraction of research faculty are convinced they are systems administrators right up until, you know, it blows up in their face. And sometimes even after that, you know. So, you know, the risks and the responsibilities are not always evenly distributed. I don't know if that answered anything, but
I think so. A lot of it depends on the people, you know, the leadership. I'm jealous of the places where their CIO had worked in research computing before, or worked at a place where they had good research computing. But you know, one thing our VPR did do, he decided to use the carrot when we first started and said, if you get a startup package, he would support whatever was asked of him if they would use it in our central system. If they wanted to buy their own equipment, he would only pay 50% of that. So that wasn't the question you asked, but I just was thinking about that was one of our, it was really important. It also showed that the VPR was so supportive of our team and what we were doing.
No, that was some good takeaways for me. I don't want, research doesn't want to own everything. It's a matter of clarifying what the goals are and having that shared governance so that we both have success.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I got from that.
Yeah, there will never be enough people to support all of this. So, you know, if we can all work together, that's the best. It's just, you know, we're pretty niche, but yeah, if we can give them, and I think it's going to work, that we're going to, you know, that they're going to now do all the software updates or not software, hardware and those sorts of things, then, you know, it's great.
yeah, the only way me and my coworker were able to be full stack in our little domain was, you know, he was really, really, really good at it and he could devote his entire week to it. You know, I was half timing it as a research engineer at the same time. And, you know, there were things I covered that he didn't, you know, but I will also tell you, you know, one manning it in central IT, yes, I'm absolutely glad not to be the full stack, but boy, when I had somebody else in the room in an emergency that could take over some things and just keep me going, it was a huge difference just to have two people versus one.
Yeah. When I saw in the chat that Kevin Thompson and Sarvani were having a chat about, you know, using the access and path resources, and you know, those are just like with Jetstream and with OSC. I mean, you know, I think I kind of see us as the on-ramp to those, and so when we can get somebody starting to use ours, then we can easily get them to scale up even further, and that's really important too. Those resources and having the people, you know, and our Skype person. I mean, that's one of the things he's doing, is helping researchers get access and their resources. So all of those, you know, and again, there will never be enough compute for everybody, as we all know, and not enough power. So, and cooling. Great.
Well, team, that brings us to the top of the hour. So thanks, Jane and Sarvani, for those great talks, and everyone for the questions. And we will see you next month for our talk on accessibility and accessibility computing systems in emerging centers. Hope to see you there. Have a good week.
Feel free to contact me if you need anything.
Same. Thank you all.
Mhm.